Today we're here visiting with our friend Irene, and she's going to tell us some wonderful memories and stories about Himlerville in Martin County, Kentucky. First, Irene, can you tell us your name, your full name?
Irene Demyan Chraznowski.
I wanted you to say it because I didn't want to say it wrong. So you were born in 1920?
Yes.
Okay. And you lived in Himlerville with your family as a small child?
Yes.
Okay. How many years did you live there?
Till I was 18.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you remember a lot. Who was in your family there?
Mom and Dad.
Okay.
I had my older sister, and my brother was next, John, and then Susan, and Andrew. His name was Andrew, but we always called him Bun.
Okay.
That was the nickname that all kids, we seem to have a nickname. And then Mildred. And I had a little sister that passed away, Mary. She was 3 or 4, and then I was next. And then Betty came along.
Wow. Big family. So what was your life like as a girl there in Himlerville?
Happy.
Good. Did your father work in the mine?
For a while, now some of these questions are before my age that I can remember too
Okay.
much, or I was old enough to remember.
Okay.
I'm sure that Daddy worked in the mine because I used to hear them talk about it. You know, kids are inquisitive, and nothing ever went by my big ears that I didn't hear, but remember, that's another story.
Irene, I think that you told me that your dad was working in a mine in West Virginia and moved to Himlerville
Yes.
with the Marchuk family as well,
Yes.
and you moved there when you were 9 years old.
9
months old, excuse me, 9 months old. So your older brothers and sisters and your mom and dad came down with the other family that you guys were so close with, and they all came down to work in Mr. Himmler's mine. Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It must have been a terrible group for the mothers.
I know your mother worked hard.
She did. She was old-fashioned and from the old country, but she was interested in where they were going and loved Mrs. Marchuk, and they were like, Mrs. Marchuk was a mother to her, because she was about 10 or maybe more years older than Mother.
Okay. And she was your godmother, right?
Yes. And I called her always Krishna. That means in Slovak or Hungarian, godmother.
Okay. Krishna Mach.
And that, for that respect, I never called her Mrs. Marchuk.
You use another name of respect with me a lot, which is Bachi. Bachi for the men?
Bachi.
Can you tell me about that
That
again?
would be Bachi Krasniotic. He was my godfather. But Bachi means like an old person. And that were friends of the family.
So you had a lot of Hungarian families
Yes.
there in Himlerville. Do you, there's a few names that Kathy would like to hear more about. The Zoldos family. Were they close to your family?
Not really close, but they were very nice and caring for each other.
Mm-hmm. Was it a big family?
The Zoldos, they had I could go through their names.
Okay. I have a picture, don't I? Here's the picture of the Zoldish family,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the mother and father.
I think that's Mrs. Zoldos when she came from.
She looks lovely.
She was a very young immigrant. And I don't know if that was her husband, Mr. Zoldos. Okay, let's go to this. This must be Mrs. Zoldos, Teresa, Frank, Gaza, John. Mr. Zoldos, and is this a person here?
Nope, well, let's see. I'm coming over. Oh, yes, it is. She's in a print dress. Is that Teresa?
Could be. And this could be Josephine. But Teresa was quite many years older than Josephine. This one looks younger though, doesn't she?
Do you know this picture?
Mm-mm.
Is this a woman in like a service uniform or a suit? With that hat?
It looks like it.
So this says Edward, Josephine, Teresa, Frank, Gaza Jr., John, and then this is Mr. and Mrs., I think, Teresa and Gaza Sr.
Now, who did you mention?
The
The-
first one is Eddie.
Eddie. He was the baby.
Okay. He looks like he's in a sailor uniform. I don't know if that's true. He's got a white hat and a white suit.
Well,
Were they in the service, do you remember?
no. And this one looks more like Mrs. Zoldos.
I think she's over here in the dark dress that's hard to see.
I don't know. That must be Teresa. then.
Yes, you're
and
right.
Josephine.
You're right.
And some in here.
Let's look at the name.
Anyway, there was Gaza and Frank
Frank.
had to be. Did I mention Frank?
Mhm.
And John,
Right.
the oldest.
And you told me that their house was the first house at the mouth of the holler.
Yes.
And here's a photo of it, I think. Check it out.
Does that look familiar?
Yes. And Mrs. Zoldos here holding Eddie as a babe,
Wow.
and her rest of her siblings.
So how old were you when,
On this picture,
yeah, like when Eddie was a baby? Are you were older than Eddie?
no, I was younger.
Okay.
I must have been about 10,
Okay.
7.
So I think you told me the story of how you walked by every day on your way to school because you left the holler, and didn't you pick up one of the Joldish girls and you walked together?
Josephine. yes.
Josephine? Was she your same age?
She was maybe a year
A
older.
year older than you. And I think that you told me that you never ever went inside that house?
Never.
Wow.
Right. And,
Maybe as far as the kitchen.
right.
But it was quite private for the family.
Hmm. And Mrs. Joldish was not from Hungary, if I remember.
She was from the other,
Germany?
no, where they did the waltzes and it was such a famous country.
Austria? Austria?
Yes. Excuse me, I just can't read.
Oh, it's no problem.
It's so easy to remember when you're not have to be cautious of what you're saying. But this is a picture of Mrs. Jones. She looked like a young lady coming to America. That could have been her father, I don't know. Could have been.
Maybe a brother?
Hard to say, honey. Excuse me.
It says on the label, Teresa Joldish, born in 1888 in Austria,
Oh,
and
yeah.
emigrated to the U.S. in 1907. And they say that that's Giza.
Oh, so it is them.
Well, must be Mr. Jonas.
Okay.
They must have been married in the old country.
And he and your father were friends, you said, and
Yes.
or they worked together at one point.
Yes. He took in my dad as a helper in the blacksmith shop.
In the blacksmith shop.
I think they knew that he needed a job that could improve the family income a little bit.
And was that after your father had his mining accident?
Now, see, I'm at that age that I wouldn't remember or know that even.
We've been trying to figure that out, you and I.
Hmm.
That your dad had that accident,
With his knee and his leg,
right?
I'm sure I was a young child.
Right. And it was a mining accident.
Yes, he was working inside the mine
Mm-hmm.
at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and when he was injured, I don't remember that either. But search party had the bell that they rang for the miners and for people to know that somebody was injured.
Right.
And he was taken. I don't know if Daddy went right away to Huntington Hospital or Williamson,
Okay.
but that's earlier than my age.
Right.
So
And they worked hard to save his leg, you told me.
I'm sure.
And he came home
I'm sure
and he
he-
couldn't work for a while.
Yes.
And
I'm sure he had wonderful care when he was in hospital at Huntington. That was in West Virginia. And it was about maybe 70, 80 miles from Himlerville.
Oh, okay.
Now, how they transported Dad, that's beyond my record.
Because
That's awesome.
when I was a small child, getting around that county was hard. I couldn't imagine how they got him out of the holler and up to Huntington. I don't know what kind of road
Right.
they would.
Dirt roads.
Yeah, they would have had to go through Kermit, West Virginia, I think,
Yes.
and gone north. a little bit. I couldn't imagine how long it took them.
I know you told me that none of the families in the holler had a horse and a buggy.
No.
Everybody walked. But I think when we talked another time, you told me that your dad came home and he couldn't work for a while because of his leg. And after that, he didn't work down in the mine anymore. He worked up on top.
With Mr. Shoulders.
Right. And I think that's about the time that Mr. Joldish reached out and had him come work for him in the blacksmith
I
shop.
think so.
I think so too.
As his helper.
Right. I think your dad was a hard worker from everything you've told me.
He was.
There's another family.
Happy he got a better job.
Yeah, probably happy you got a better job.
Yeah, that's a hard job, the mining. Another family, I'm probably saying these wrong. Fodor?
Fodor, right.
Order.
We've got them listed in order of how the houses were laid out.
Okay.
Do you want to
Yeah.
do it that way?
Yeah, let's do it that way.
So after the Joldish house,
Juhas.
the U-house.
They were a Hungarian family. They had 3 daughters, and the son was the young man, about 8 years old, their son. They were all quite set in their living quarters. They had nice homes.
Do you remember the girls' names, Irene? Are you able to speak up a little bit?
Hmm?
Can you speak up a little bit? Thanks.
Excuse me.
Yep. And do you remember the Johas daughters' names?
I think Elizabeth,
Elizabeth,
Margaret,
Margaret.
Anne.
Yeah. How about the boy?
He was a spoiled little boy.
The only boy with 3 girls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he would be spoiled.
I can still remember him in his knicker pants.
Mm-hmm.
He was older than me, younger,
Younger than you.
yes. Because I was good friends with Anne.
Okay.
She was next to Margaret.
Was Anne about your age?
Yes.
Okay.
They were a beautiful family of girls.
Aw. And you told me after the flood. What'd you tell me about this family?
They moved to Pittsburgh.
And then when somebody left after the flood and your family stayed, did somebody else move into the house or was it empty?
For a while it was empty.
Okay.
And I don't know if they moved when it was after the flood or before, because they had family in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Even the older girl, I think she was married by then
Okay.
to a Hedica boy.
That's another family name too. Was that another family in the holler?
Yes.
Well, we'll get to them.
There was his mother, I think, was deceased, but Mr. Hedica and Irene and Steve, I think his name was Steve, handsome young man,
Yeah.
and the daughter was a lovely young girl. And Mrs. Hedica had a falling accident, and I think she didn't live like years, but maybe a short time. I was too young for that too, but I remember Mother talking about Mrs. Harrigan, a good neighbor,
Right.
caring.
Huh. You had a lot of good neighbors.
Yes,
So,
I have to say,
so after the Yohas family,
Marchuk.
that's the family you knew so well. You know a lot about that family.
Yeah, they had Paul, George, Andy, and John was the youngest. And Krishnamach and Krishniotis, they had a small home,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so lovely and so clean and
Mm-hmm.
so with a picket fence around it.
A trademark of Himlerville from all the
Yes.
pictures we've seen. Let's back up a little bit, Irene, because just back up in your story, I mean.
Okay.
So, the Meyerchucks lived in Wyden,
Well, Mom and Dad lived.
where you and your family were from. And they came down with the Demyan family, your family, to Himlerville.
Yes.
And they built their house first. And where did you guys live for a couple
I don't
years?
think that even their house was quite ready.
Okay.
But, you know, if they had already, that's where they were going to settle in Himlerville.
Right.
They had a additional, not hooked to the family, but a lot of these Hungarian peoples had extra. It was, we called it just a shanty,
Right.
but it was quite good size. So I'm sure our family was moved, and maybe also Mom and Dad. We were all living in that shanty.
Right. For a couple years, I think you did that,
Yes.
didn't you? You, your mom, your dad,
Yes,
Anna, John, Sue, and Andy.
Sue, Milton, Irene,
Oh, and Mildred.
and Mary.
Oh, and did
Yes.
Mary live there too? Marishka?
Yes, that was before she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't so vivid in my memory either, because I was maybe 3, maybe she was 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't have, you know, it's not like today. You have things written down,
Right.
how old. I'm sure Daddy had that,
Right.
but at my age I didn't have the knowledge of
Right.
that.
Well, and we talked about this too. It's usually on the headstones, but your dad built a cross for Mary, and you think that cross is gone now because it was made of wood?
I'm sure it was. And then I don't remember if, well, Uncle John must have came from Hungary,
Your father's brother?
my father's brother, after Mary's death.
Do you think when he came you were in your own home or were you in the shanty home?
Well, when he came, I think he came, we were still living in Wyden.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure
Okay.
whether he came after we were living, could be in Himlerville, probably.
You have some memories of him having friendships with people in Himlerville.
Oh, he was very happy to be in America. And all the young men were they conglomerated and came to our house. And he was a young shoemaker. Not shoemaker, but he did the soling and he repaired shoes. And Daddy did that also on evenings and maybe Saturdays.
Shoes for other people?
Yes.
Because you always tell me you didn't get shoes, except for church.
Well, that was the important time that we had our shoes on.
Right. You also told me that Uncle John suffered from the war,
He
World
did.
War One.
He came. Did you say hold on?
No, World War One. Correct?
Pardon?
World War One.
Yes.
Okay.
Between Germany and I don't know if America was in. I don't think America was in that war.
Okay.
Germany and probably Austria and anyway, he was pretty close. It was pretty close to the end of the war in Germany. And they had this gas that they used, the
Right.
Germans. And a lot of the soldiers, I think, died right in the fields where they were from the gas.
Mm-hmm.
And Uncle John was gassed also. He had suffered with that gas. Not real bad, but it affected him in some way. He wasn't as spry and active as the American boys, but he mixed in with the family. And of course there was we called him Uncle Ernest. He's the one that brought my daddy's brother from Hungary. And I'm sure he provided
Did you say Uncle Ernie?
Uncle Ernest.
Ernest, excuse me, yes.
I think that he was married to one of Dad's sisters that had passed away, but he was still very loved by Uncle Ernest, and he they loved our family.
And he lived in Ohio?
He lived in Chicago.
Oh, in Chicago. I'm sorry, in Chicago. You always describe him as elegant and well-dressed.
He was. So I don't know what kind of job he had, but he was concerned about our family and Uncle John. And then this tragic thing that happened that anyway, I have to say that Uncle John was friends with all the young buddies. They became buddies, and Uncle John had a little start of a little, and we're Dad always, and he joined Dad. They used to work together on some shoes that people brought over to have shoes repaired.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a loving family, all these young men and families. And I know Uncle John had friends, even a Domesday girl was a good friend of Uncle John's. They made friends easily. They needed family,
Mm-hmm.
and the Domesday family loved Uncle John also.
Mm-hmm.
They were friends.
Mm-hmm. And he was about, you thought, maybe 22 when he came?
A little older.
Maybe a little older.
Excuse me.
You want a drink, Irene?
Okay.
So he must have been in Himlerville for a few years to get established those wonderful friendships.
He was. And Uncle Ernest had bought a building not downtown Chicago,
Uh-huh.
but that was to be where Uncle John was going to have a place for his workshop.
In Chicago.
Yeah,
Oh, gosh.
yeah, he was to be on his own. And he was quite ahead of Dad as a shoemaker.
Okay.
Even though his age, he was very young, but he had all that training and private kind of school that they went to learning.
He was your father's younger brother, Irene?
Yes.
Okay.
The only brother that I know of.
Okay.
But then there was Peter and another brother. I think they were in the war. I had pictures of them too. But they were with a different bunch of pictures that came from the old country.
Were they all on a picnic when Uncle John had his accident?
And Uncle John lived at Beauty in Himlerville, and I think I remember that Mother had a supper, and she says, "John, you shouldn't go swimming here,"
Oh,
because
right.
these bunch of young guys came to call him, and Mother says it's quite a heavy kind of food that he eats.
Right.
Well, anyway, it made no difference to the young ones. They waited around a house for John to get ready. And after he had his supper, they all went off to the Tug River.
Okay. Yeah.
That wasn't the time he drowned, maybe. They went together many times.
Mm-hmm.
But this was we'll go back to the time he was drowned.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to the banks at the Tug River and sitting in the sand piles
Mm-hmm.
as a child. But we had our own group. We were with children, young children. And I don't remember too much of it because I was too young. I'm sure I wasn't in that group of young people or even going down there to the river.
Right.
Mom and Dad were strict about you're not allowed to go to Tug River
Mm-hmm.
until you get older. And you're able to know, we know that you and Mildred and Andy, you're all in the group and together. Well, and Uncle John and this group of his, they went swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was visiting at my aunt's house, Devner's,
Uh-huh.
and she recalled that she saw like this man dressed in white, maybe a soldier coming to let them know about John's address accident. Anyway, that was terrible. If the family that Uncle John was drowned, or when he went swimming, he went under in the water, and probably that gas that had affected him,
Mm-hmm.
his lungs didn't have the strength to fully take care of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just barely remember about when his body was found in that place at the river. A doctor was there to perform, I don't know, autopsy or
Mm-hmm.
then his body was brought to our house. I can barely remember that. My sister Ann had a job away from home already.
Mm-hmm.
She was probably 16, 17, and she was called home. And then there was the funeral.
Was that at St. Stephen's?
No, it was St. Stephen's. I don't remember though.
Okay.
All of that. I was too young.
Okay.
But I know he was buried up at the cemetery at Himlerville.
Same place where your sister is, right?
Yeah.
Your dad made the cross for Uncle John
Yeah.
as well, you told me. Right. And your family tried to get a headstone for him because he was a veteran.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yes. But Dad went through the things that he had to go through with Inez, and I guess begged to try to get a stone for him after he was buried. And well, he was an immigrant, you can say.
Right?
He didn't have, I don't think, an American citizen.
Right.
And he came from Hungary. So he wasn't entitled to a stone
I
like
see.
our American men were.
I see. It was wonderful that your dad tried.
He did. Dad went through a lot of heartaches and, well, losing his young brother.
Yes.
It's such a tragic time. He was happy that Uncle John came from Hungary, and
Yes.
their life wasn't as grown in the life that he had planned on having.
Right.
Right. Uncle John. And I'm sure, I hope I'm not there boring.
No.
Only I know about these things, and you people haven't heard about it, so you could be tired of listening. But I'm trying to explain just the way it was. My godmother took care of Uncle John after he had to be cleaned and
Mm-hmm.
dressed and
Right.
The coffin came from Williamson, and Uncle John was put in that coffin,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on the big front porch that we had. I remember the black ribbon we had on the door.
Oh, wow.
When people came to give last respects, how sad that was
Right.
when he was laid out.
Oh, I bet a lot of people came, though.
I'm sure it was a sorrowful time for people, Hungarian people. They all knew that he came from from Hungary, and what a tragic life that ended up.
Right. You told me once to survive the war and then come to America and start a new life,
Yeah.
and then to die tragically was just so overwhelming for everyone.
Yes, it was. I remember my mother. It was hard on my mom and all of the kids. They were all older than me, and they knew and understood and got more information about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Mom says if he would have lived in, he could have went to New York City, Chicago, or any big city and build. He was set things for fitting shoes
Right.
and that trained.
He really had a craft.
Yes.
Right.
At his very young age. But of course it would have taken a few years for him to be that profession. And
Right.
well, anyway, that was
Yeah.
the close of that.
I guess you just think about how wonderful it was that he was surrounded by family and friends
Yes.
for his time in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember Dad always on Sunday when he wasn't working, he would sit on a porch, and how mournful that was for Daddy.
I'm sure.
Us kids didn't even interfere. We'd let him. He would sit there and go through his own sorrows.
Right.
But I know that I was a kid, and I felt sorry to know that what Dad what kind of pain he had losing his brother. And the Marchuk boys and Marchuk family were very kind to my parents.
I was just going to bring them up because we had been talking about them being the third house in the holler, and that how you lived on their property. And I was going to ask you about the gentleman that came from Ohio to build the house.
Mr. Savolnik, he built Marchuk's house that was completed by the time they started then on our house up in the holler. Then of course there were the Lazars. They were Romanian family, Hungarian Romanian.
Right.
And they were very nice people also.
Did they have children, the Lazars?
Yes, they had 2 older boys that were in Toledo, I think, had jobs. And they had a young boy, George, school age, and a daughter I don't know if they were change of life children, but they were so happy with the young family that they had.
Were those two younger children older than you?
I think Georgie was, but Mary was a little bit younger.
Okay,
But we were all friends as children.
right. So we had the Zoldish, the Johas, I'm not saying it correctly, I know, I apologize. The Meyercheks, the Lazars, then the empty lot, right?
Empty lot, yes.
And then your house,
And that house,
the Demyan house.
yes.
Maybe we'll finish the family names, and then it'll be almost time to take a break, and we can come back after lunch and talk about your house a little bit more and other properties, things like that. So after your house, I think your aunt's house was next. Let's talk about the Debners.
Yeah.
And nice and loud if you can, Irene.
Pardon me?
Is if you can speak loudly if you can, or just a little louder.
They had quite a nice house.
The Debnars?
Debnars. My aunt was more American, like she wasn't so, didn't stay to be like her old country person, but she got around more, and the children, Julia and Helen, they were more active than we were.
More active in town, you mean, or?
No, more active in, yes, in with all of us kids and my aunt, excuse me, my aunt was more, she got around more than my mother.
This was your mother's sister, right?
Yes,
And she came from Czechoslovakia?
from Slovenia.
Okay.
And she was, they were friends with the Sergiev family.
Okay.
Their daughters had a big boarding house in Erie, West Virginia. And Julia was old enough that she went to work for them.
Julia Debnar?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that made the Sergius and Nana Debnar closer together because they got more information about what was going on there
Right.
in Gary.
And your aunt, how did she come to Himlerville? She was widowed, I think,
Yes.
and had a son back in the old
Yeah,
country.
and his son was left with Grandma.
Right.
And I know that she used to, when anybody went to the post office, isn't there a letter from Andy? Or, she was waiting for mail from him.
Right. And that was one of your jobs, wasn't it, as a kid, to walk into town and go to the post office?
As I got older,
Okay.
but Helen was still home. That was they took care of their own. That was their own. But I used to go to my aunt's house quite a bit because I was the youngest in the Demyan family at the time. And she was a more understanding and had more patience than my mother had, a big family.
Right.
And it was harder.
Right.
And Nana Debnar was so kind to us. I know she was to me.
And how did she meet Mr. Debnar?
I don't know how they met.
Was he Hungarian, Irene?
Yes.
He was Hungarian.
Slovak, Hungarian.
Not strict Hungarian?
No.
And then they had their children, and they moved right next to you. Your mother must have been happy to have her family there.
I'm sure they were happy, but Dad didn't like too much Mike Demner because he liked to hit the bottle quite often,
Yeah?
and my father wasn't that kind of person.
Right.
If he did have a drink, it was sensible, and that was it.
Right.
But Mr. Uncle Mike used to get sometimes a little loud.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Anyway, they all got along.
Good.
They all managed.
Then the next family was the Such family, I think.
Yes. Search Bachin, Search Nini. They came from Hungary,
Mm-hmm.
and she came from a kind of well-to-do family.
Okay.
And she went back to Hungary to visit her father. I don't know if she had a mother or just a father. Anyway, Anyway, they were already married, Srichvachi, and her father picked him because he worked for the Mrs. Sirch's father in the barn, taking care of they were Hungarian kind of horses, well trained, I guess, beautiful.
In the old country?
Yes,
Okay.
horses they had.
And that's where Mr. Such worked in the barn.
No, her husband.
Right.
And I'm sure her father already picked out this young man that
Interesting.
was going to be the husband.
Interesting. And then you told me that they were generous to St. Stephen's Church.
Yes, the Such family.
Mm-hmm.
Those those certificates they bought into,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Mr. Search, I'm sure they came from Gary, and they had money. I don't know how many of those certificates they bought into, and they had a savings.
And then they donated something to the church, didn't they?
Some of the colored windows, the bell. They were very generous.
The stained glass, was it?
Yeah,
How nice.
Was it a Catholic church?
yes.
In Himlerville, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And a lot of the Hungarian belonged to that church. It was well kept up because the Hungarian people all belonged. It's what is it? They would belong to church and came when we had the services. And it was like they do at church.
Right. Let's talk about a few more families if we could, and then it'll be time to take a break.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, so we had the Zoldish family, the Johas, the Meyercheks, the Lazars, the Empty Lot, the Demyans, the Debnars, and the Such family. It was a big hauler, I think.
In back of the search watch, lived this old bachelor. He must have had some money. He had a cute house. I think it had 5 rooms in it.
Uh-huh.
But he had a shanty that he lived in. But that house was, I don't know if he planned that, but when his wife was going to come from the old country, that they had a place to live.
Was this Andy Bocci?
Yes.
And what was his last name?
Jonas. Yeah, Jonas. But really in American it was Jones.
Mr. Jones, but Mr. Jonach.
And he had bought some lot of land up in that harbor.
Uh-huh.
Like the whole, and I don't know who was selling the land, but he had a nice place. He took care of this place. He had fruit trees, and he had like a garden and
Do you think
chicken.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think they leased or bought their land from Mr. Himmler?
I don't know.
Okay.
And then there were the Curtises across after the collar went in a wrong thing. Andy Butcher was the last one there. Then across Curtises.
Right.
They were good friends.
Before we talk about them, when you were mentioning the fruit, you said he had the cherries and the plums,
Yes.
and that your brothers helped him out with that a
Yeah.
little bit.
They'd go and pick the fruit, take it to Kermit,
Right.
take orders, and they sold, not letting that fruit go into waste, but people bought so much eggs they bought.
And how did the boys transport all of that? Did they walk or did they borrow a buggy?
A wagon.
Okay.
I'm sure their wagon was overloaded.
Did your brothers have that wagon, Irene? Or did Mr.
I don't know.
Mr. Jonach have
I
it?
don't know. I'm sure that they had good delivery.
Yes. Okay, so now on to the Kurtz family, which
Yeah.
you say the American name is Curtis, right? Can you spell
it was-
Kurtz?
Was Kertes.
Can you spell that for us?
In American it was Kertesc.
Okay.
And Mr. Kertes was more interested in raising a grapehopper.
Oh, he was good with grapes, she
Yeah.
told me.
He had a nice place where he had his grapes planted. That was beautiful that he took care of them. And when it was grape season, he had beautiful grapes. But I think he used them mostly for his own purpose of making wine. I don't know what all they used those
You
grapes.
said you had a memory of that he even sprayed the grapes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did Mr. Curtis have children?
Oh, yeah. There was Joe was the oldest boy.
Okay.
Charlie, Frank,
Uh-huh.
and Willie. Willie was my age. We went to school together.
No girls?
2 girls. The oldest one was Julia. Eventually, she went to New York City, got a job taking care of children.
Ah. How about the other girl?
Betty and Elizabeth were at home mostly with Mom, helping with the work and everything. You had to take care of it home.
And were Mr. and Mrs. Curtis both from Hungary?
Yes,
So they were strict Hungarians.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't even remember them talking in Slovak.
Okay. Which you did in your home, right?
Yes.
Right. Right. Well, Irene,
Yeah,
what do you think about taking a break?
let's go.
Let's go. There we have
It's
it.
time. There it is. You did really well so far.
Well, I'm sorry that my voice started getting
Soft.
ill.
The reason I asked you to speak up is we have some competing noise from that air conditioning unit.
Yeah.
That's all. I think
Yeah.
you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Will protect my cross.
I will protect your cross. We'll talk about that this afternoon, okay?
I enjoyed meeting the people I met. These ladies made me feel so relaxed,
Aw,
not tense or nervous at all.
wonderful.
Good.
That's good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I enjoyed meeting the girl that took care of